are gonna be talking about the different constructs, the different theories. But for the beginning, I'm gonna be talking about the behaviorism. And when we talk about behaviorism, we cannot let behind the army method, which is the audiolingual method. It was developed in World War II in order to rapidly develop effective oral skills in foreign languages for military personnel. And as you know, for the behaviorism, there are three principal constructs, which are going to be first the frequency, then conditioning, and finally the similar. Frequency is going to be constant drillings, repetition. Condition is going to be correcting the students with positive and negative reinforcement. Um, For Nick Ellis, she argues that the is the speed with language learning takes place depending large part of the frequency of a specific item called construction in the input. In other words, learning is an associative process here. So the role of a teacher is gonna be the center of the class. He's gonna be the one giving orders, giving the information, giving everything. The student is gonna be there to be corrected. As you know, Krashen is part of the nativism. And for he, natural refers to the main assumption of the proposal that the L2, like the L1, is not the result of practice, but the exposure to the input, on the condition that the input satisfies the I plus 1 formula. So for him, learning is not that important, but acquiring. And first, we have the first hypothesis, which is the acquisition learning hypothesis. According to Krashen and third, learning does not lead to acquisition. Then we come to the monitor hypothesis, according to which the conscious learning can work as a monitor, checking and repairing the errors resulting from acquisition. Then we go to the natural ordering hypothesis, in which it's going to be pretty much easy. There are some steps that we need to follow in order to acquire a new knowledge. In this case, it's going to be languages. So we need first to learn, let's say, the verb to be. Then we go to present continuous, let's say. Next, we have the input hypothesis, which is acquisition, but not learning. It's possible by exposure, meaningful. And then we have the affective hypothesis, or the affective filter hypothesis, which treats a learner's emotional states and attitude as a filter that either passes or blocks the input needed for acquisition. Krashen and Taylor claims that while motivation and self-confidence make the filter fully permeable, anxiety works as an input blocking factor. What is the role of a teacher here? Well, for him, there wasn't really a need for a teacher because the students were acquiring the knowledge. So there wasn't a need for a teacher. Then we come to the nativist approach. According to the nativist approach, the mind is genetically predisposed to language. It is equipped with an inborn language acquisition device, the LAD. We're going to be talking about later. But first, for McNeil, claim that the device is responsible for four abilities. The first one, the ability to tell difference between speech sounds and other non-linguistic noises. Second, the ability to categorize and commit linguistic data. The third, the ability to distinguish a certain possible linguistic system from that are not possible, from those that are not possible. And finally, the ability to constantly evaluate and develop the simplest possible system. Okay, so it comes with universal grammar. We're going to be talking about Chomsky. So for Chomsky, the assumption of innate universal language properties is motivated by the need to explain the uniformly successful and speedy acquisition of language by children in spite of insufficient input. In UG, uh, universal principle form part of the mental representation of language, and it is this mental grammar that mediates between the sound and the meaning of the language. For me, universal grammar are those concepts that are present on every single language, like mother, like love, like hate. And the lab is the innate capacity to acquire or learn grammatical rules. With the universal grammars, we have two things: universal principle and parameters. So the principles for me are the general ideas. Like for example, the capacity of a student of a learner to identify different sounds, and the parameters is the switch in which we are based on exposure. So yeah, then we come to poverty of the stimulus. Poverty of the stimulus argues that the direct or indirect intervention is indeed forthcoming and that one doesn't need in a test to explain language acquisition. However, in most instances, the language learning environment does not provide information to the children, so they will form an language. When then we have the critical period hypothesis is from Piaget. He stated that there are like some stages of development, early stages, because it is from 0 to 11 years. And there comes the brain plasticity of the student. So in those ages, the student is going to be learning quicker and is going to be getting more information and it's going to be easy for him. I'm going to set an example here with poverty or the stimulus and critical period. Yeah, we have Jenny Willie, the savage girl, which she didn't receive the stimulus necessary to develop herself in the early stages. So she couldn't develop, she couldn't speak, she couldn't communicate. Now we're going to be talking about Vygotsky, the social cultural theory. So for Vygotsky, he argues that human mental function is fundamentally a mediated process organized by cultural artifacts, activities, and concepts. So he planned five hypotheses. First one, the mediation, in where we assimilate different structures that could be like language, that could be literacy, numeracy, but we related them in our like mind. So let's have an example. Let's say we are going to dig a hole. In order to do so, we're going to be first thinking on what there are like tools to do so. So the first thing that probably is gonna come to your mind is gonna be a shovel. Then regulation. Regulation is a three stages process. First is the identification of an object, then other regulation, the assistant, the scaffolding by teachers, by parents, and other people. And finally, the self-regulation, in where the student is gonna generate an output with none or little assistance. Then it comes the number three, internalization. Within internalization is a process of negotiation, that are reorganize the relationship of the individual to its social environment. For example, mm, let's say I'm mad, or someone is mad. So how can I internalize that? Maybe because he's doing a face or he's moving his hand. So we make a relation there. Then we come to imitation. In imitation, we are not talking about mimicking, okay? Imitation is a self-selective behavior. For example, we are trying to discuss if a word it is well pronounced, like finish or finished or finish it for ourselves. So we internalize this concept. And finally, we have the zone of proximal development, in which uh, is the distance between the actual development and the level of potential development. So usually is